Hello there, we are your hosts Vivek and Pavitra from the Agile Coach Podcast. In this podcast, we bring fresh perspectives to you through our interviews with thought leaders in Agile coaching, facilitation, business analysis, and product management roles. Enjoy.
Well, hello, everyone. Really excited for you guys to tune into this episode, especially if you consider yourself an Agile leader. I've known Darian for a few years now and was with him when he first started his Agile career. And I've just really seen him do really well in his career and really thrive as an Agile leader. So Darian, really good to have you. Thanks for being in the Agile Coach podcast today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's an honor.
Yeah. So maybe we can start a little bit with your background because your career obviously has taken a unique path from coaching basketball at a Division I level to obviously leading Agile teams for some of the major companies now. Can you maybe share a little bit about that journey and what even sparked that transition for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very interesting because, coaching D1 basketball, I never thought about doing anything else. And we had a friend who was a Scrum Master or Agilist at the time. We didn't really know what it was. Like, what is a Scrum Master, right? Just like I get asked now a lot today. But we had a friend that was doing it, and I never really thought about it before. But I remember coaching my last season. We had come to the end of the season. We were in the off season. And I just started having a couple more conversations with my wife and with our mentors about, what I wanted life to look like and just different things like that. And I think I just come to a turning point mentally, physically, with the way that I wanted things to look. And so I started to ask our friend a couple more questions. And the great thing was my wife was ready to transition a little bit before me as my coaching skills in another environment. Because I think that was initially the scariest part is what do you do if you're not going to coach, right?
Right.
And so where can I utilize my skills? And after a few conversations, learning about being a Scrum Master, how you're helping teams, how you're serving leaders or you're coaching and facilitating, I was like, oh, I can do that, right? I may not know the thing, but I can figure out how to help build teams. I can work with a multitude of different backgrounds and people. That was really where my journey kind of took off. And I'm thankful that once I jumped into it and started to learn about it, I never really looked back. I think that's
and I'm guessing a lot of your being in the coaching setting, a lot of that skill naturally transferred because obviously being a Scrum Master, coming from a coaching background, you are naturally already doing some of the things like coaching, mentoring, teaching. At the end of the day, you are driving a team, you're helping a team to get to a high performing and self-organizing team. And so you naturally had a lot of skills that transferred over as well.
Right. Yeah. And I think for any industry that you're in, I mean, I've met so many Scrum Masters from different fields, people that went to law school, medical school, all kinds of things. Most people aren't already in tech that become Scrum Masters. Some of them come from salespeople or in things like that. So I think one of the interesting things is you just have to learn to take what you've already been successful at or done and apply that to this industry, and you can be successful at it. So whether you're detail oriented or you're a very big team building, you build relationships really well, take that strength and hone that, and then learn the other skills along the way. And I think you can do very well.
Yeah, totally. Next question I wanted to ask you, obviously, and I've experienced this quite a bit, being in teams where I used to have, people that weren't even really part of the team would come to the development team and just kind of pull them in multiple direction. Obviously there's a committed items, committed work that their team is doing. And it's kind of unavoidable at times that teams will just kind of get pulled away to, multiple directions. How have you helped your team just kind of focus on driving that business value without really for them feeling overwhelmed in a sense?
Well, yeah, and that's the key word is business value. And what I've seen is when you have multiple people coming to a team or even one person coming to a team, it's a completely new team. So based on the skill sets of different folks, you may have 6 engineers on a team and 2 of them can do the brunt of the work because they're really seasoned and focused. And you may have 4 that don't. So the way I've always taught teams is it's not about slowing down, but sometimes you have to slow down to speed up, right? And so pair programming has been really good. Just sitting with someone as they work has been really good. And I really just try to help teams understand the focus and the mindset behind that. Because what I've seen is if you don't do that, long term, it's going to hurt you. If you do it, long term, it will help you because now everyone's more on a level playing field. And then outside of that, going back to business value specifically, most of the time your team is working on 3 or 4 efforts at the same time. So you really have to figure out what percentage of work do you want to put towards the highest impact, right? When does that work due? Is it 3 months? Is it next sprint? Like, what does that deliverable look like? And then really focus on that, because a lot of times we try to pull in a bunch of tech debt, or if someone isn't at seed and we try to give them this work that may be tech debt, but it's not going towards the asset business value. So we really focus in on that, and we take time to have meetings to talk about that and make sure it's very accurate. And I help our product owner or product manager, whoever's setting that vision for the team, I help them help the team understand that clearly. And I think that's very important, because a lot of time we're working in the micro for a macro thing, but we don't always know what we're working towards, right? We're building bricks, but we don't know why we're building the wall or we're building a castle, right? Ever. So I really try to help people hone in on that so they know what they're doing.
Yeah, I guess in that, are you directly like working with product owners from product managers, like think about the product vision, the roadmap frequently? Like, are you guys looking at that more frequently and
Absolutely.
helping the development team in a sense, the Scrum team understand like, hey, here is what you're doing, how it directly impacting the business value, or, you guys working on certain items, here's what's driving and here's how it maps to like the bigger objective and the vision of the product and the company?
Yes. So the roadmap, whatever you use for roadmap, whether it's Excel or Miro or wherever you're using, I have learned to implement the roadmap in at least 2 of the 5 traditional ceremonies that we run, right? So sprint planning,
Oh.
backlog refinement, we start with the roadmap and we show ourselves as a star. This is where we are and this is where we're trying to go. So it's at the forefront of everybody's mind. The entire team knows where we're going. They know what we're doing. They know which work is most important now and what things we're working on, maybe 10% each sprint for the future, right? But you have to start the call and keep those tools accurate, because if you just have the tool in a SharePoint or you have it in a report somewhere, nobody's checking it. So make it a part of your call. It can literally take 2 minutes of you going over and say, hey team, as a reminder, this is what we completed last week. This is what we're doing now. This is where we are, but this is why, right? And I've just learned that sets the stage really well for your calls. You don't have to do it every time, but the longer calls that you have done an hour, hour and a half or longer, start those calls with your roadmap. Understand the vision, keep it at the forefront, and don't let it be forgotten.
Yeah, I mean, if the teams are really tuned into really the why, right? It probably just even helps them kind of be motivated and, kind of helps them
Totally.
tie their identity in a sense into like something bigger than like the small task or user story that they're kind of working on a daily basis.
Yeah, everybody wants a sense of empowerment. Like they are contributing something valuable to the team, like they're having an impact. And if you feel like a pawn, that's probably not what you want to feel like, right?
Right.
That's
Yeah.
part of my job, and what I take ownership of is making sure folks on the team feel empowered. And if they don't, why?
Right.
How are we being led? And it's not anybody's fault, but it's a team thing. And that's what I always try to make sure of, even as I have one-on-ones and things like that. It's like, if I hear certain concerns, I do my best to bring it back to a team thing, because I think we often forget that. Because as engineers and even in my role, we get so like siloed to what we're doing, we forget we're part of a team. So that's how I keep that at the forefront. Sure.
Wow, that's really cool. That's really cool. I know we talked about earlier just that value driven, but then like there might be team members that are a little bit senior and some are just kind of doing small tasks, and obviously want to upscale the team to a point where it feels like it's not just 2 people driving everything, and that responsibility and the sense of like I'm adding value is kind of shared across the team. I guess apart from pair programming, and I would kind of love to kind of have you touch a little bit on pair programming. Sometimes, I mean, it's very effective, but I feel like it's a missed opportunities, because also sometimes like teams are like, oh no, I just kind of want to do my own thing, or like, give me a story, I'll just do it myself. Like, what strategies like has worked for you to kind of ensure that upskill is happening across the team, but also how do you kind of get these team members to say yes to like, hey, let's sit together and I'm gonna, maybe you might not know this, but like I'm gonna help you, or when it comes to like code review, like the person really taking some time and like giving certain feedback so that this person can grow? What are some things that you're doing around that?
Yeah, so it's really important. And let me give a basketball example. It's really important to understand who your captain is. Is my point guard or my four man, like whoever that is. So most teams, the leader of that team is probably one of the engineers, maybe a tech lead, an analyst, the PO, whoever
Mm,
that is. Talk to that person because
mm,
that's the person you have to help them understand the value of that. And if you talk to your tech lead and they're like, oh yeah, okay, I get what you're saying now. I get how it'll help us down the road. I get how it'll be like paying off my shoulders, right? If you help them understand that, then they'll jump into it and then it'll become more of a thing because the team is going to follow someone. It's going
yeah.
to follow someone on the team. So I have one-on-one with my tech lead. We talk about how that may help. And I had used that person as examples of, hey, can you bring this person with you? This
Mm,
new engineer, can you bring them with you as a, help them learn, let them basically shadow you for a sprint or two and teach them
mm,
some of the ways that you're coding or what some of the ways that you've been successful. And that will lead into other things, right? So maybe our next highest developer, second or third person, whatever, may be able to help another new member of the team. And now you have
mm.
multiple people flowing and it won't last like that forever. I think we forget what like the short term really is. So that's how I've helped in the front end. I find the people who I know are leaders in the team. I talk to them one-on-one and I help them understand the value of how this will help us in the future.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's great. And people naturally like want to help, most people, right? Like, because I'm sure teaching, coaching for them also, it's like a sense of, I mean, pride in their work, and they feel like, okay, like my knowledge, like there's a value in it. I guess it's just really how you're setting them up or what you're saying to them that's going to allow them to be open to do some of that work.
Absolutely. Yeah, and another way too is, I mean, we work in the corporate world, right? So a lot of times
Mm,
things are done when there's a contract to it or something like that, right? So if you think
mhm,
about a Scrum Master, one of the things we help the team do is we come up with team agreements, right? So whether you've been with the
mm,
team for a long time and you need to revisit it, or whether you're new with the team and you need to come back to it, it's how do you put that there? How do you ask follow-up questions to figure out how do we want to grow as a team? We want to practice
mm,
continuous improvement. So we want to get to a certain level of this good, but then we don't want to stagnate out. It may stagnate out
yeah.
for you, but we want to go up again. So how do we continuously practice that? And if you have a team agreement that talks about pair programming, then you already know
Mm,
that maybe every 5 sprints, every 4 sprints, we're going to practice that no matter where we are. Because maybe somebody's
mhm,
learned something new. Maybe they went off and got a new certification. Maybe they worked on a story that they've never had to work on before and they learned something from it that they could teach the team. So we're always
mm,
practicing that and looking for ways to continuously grow. So it can't be a one-off thing. It's got to be continuous.
yeah. Yeah. Do you guys do any like lunch and learn? I used to do some of those. I don't know.
Yeah, not specific with our team, but overall. So we do like
Mm,
product lunch and learns. So like our product
mm,
owners run that and they invite folks into that. We do Agile lunch and learns. So we hear a
mm,
lot of like do Agile, but we want to teach people to be Agile. And it's a little
mm,
bit different, right? So we do that. We do a lot of design strategy, lunch and learns and things like that. So it's
okay.
really teaching people overall the process because as you're in an org, and this is when you start to think more high level, right? Because teams are in teams.
Mm,
But as you start to think high level, there's a lot of people involved. And if you want to understand that picture and understand what you're doing and how that applies to this bigger org, sometimes it's good to understand how your design team sees things, how they work on things. Why does that impact you
mm,
as an engineer, whether you're front end or back end, right? The
right.
design team is doing things for a certain way. How do they interact with users? You may have never talked with a stakeholder or user before, but how is your team doing that? So you can start to understand, okay, I understand why things are switching so much. I understand why
Mhm,
they want things this way or why we do it this way. I wouldn't do it that way, but they want it that way. And you start to understand a little bit more. And it gives, again, it goes back to that empowerment piece and it helps you
mm.
really own what you're doing.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I love that. I guess now let's talk a little bit about how do you coach your team to kind of take ownership of just small, like things, right? Because again, I think, and this may have changed, but like teams sometimes it's like kind of fully don't grasp like what your role as a scrum master or just really an agile leader is, right? Because I mean they know their work, but they don't necessarily grasp like the scope of like the impact that an agile leader can make. And I still think that there's so much misunderstanding, even in a leadership level, of like how truly a great agile leader can create that impact. And so I'm sure you get, asked to do small things because it's like, oh, like they can just set up this meeting, or they can just kind of do the small things for me. So how have you coached your team to just kind of like own their work, especially when you have to like, repeat so many things, and kind of, you don't want to come across like, oh, he's asking me to do the same thing again, or like you have to kind of tell them over and over again. Like, how have you kind of taught them to take ownership?
Yeah. Well, a very wise person once told me that you truly know something when you can teach it.
Mm-hmm.
And I took that to heart a long time ago. And so I practiced that with my teams. And so, like, let me give a very small example. We're at stand up, it's 15 minutes a day. And it's very easy for us during that call for folks to say, hey, I'm sharing my screen, right? As a Scrum Master during that time, if need be, not all the time. But hey, Darian, can you move that story from to do in progress? I started working on it last week, right? That's very easy for me to do forever. Whether I've been with the team for a long time or I'm new to the team, it's very easy for me to do. But if I want the work to be more accurate, if I want our story points or our burn down chart or whatever that looks like to be more accurate, I really need to start coaching the team on how to do that themselves. Because if not, I'm giving them a disservice, right? So a coach is not there to do, a coach is there to teach, a coach is there to coach. So
Yeah.
I started, for me and my personality, I know myself, right? I had to start making no's fun. So instead of just being rigid and saying no, I was like, nope, can't do that. Working on continuous improvement. The team has to start taking
Yeah.
right? And it sounds fun, but it does create some tensity sometimes, some tense. But at the same time, I have to repeat that, and I repeat it over and over again until people start doing it. And it may take multiple sprints. And I think that's where some people may get frustrated with, patience. But I'm okay with that because I understand the long-term goal of that. And so now with teams that I may work with, I'm not moving stories. So I'm
Yeah.
really, I may not even be sharing my screen, but I'm not moving stories. Stories are already there. So when we pull up our screen, our stand-ups or daily, whatever you call it, everything's accurate. And we can get to talking about it instead of taking time moving stories around. And I think it creates such a more effective meeting. But had I not started to say no, or had I not started to coach, that wouldn't be that way, right?
Yeah.
That's one like small example on the very basic level.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, it's also like creating patterns in a sense, right? Because
Absolutely.
if teams are not used to doing certain things, like that was just not a practice, that was just not like a daily habit in a sense for them, then like you have to do certain things to like break that pattern and to create new patterns, because otherwise, oh, like I've never had to do it. So it's like also not remembering. Sometimes like I've seen that it's not like they don't want to do it, but it's just not part of their daily pattern or habit. And so they just like forget. And I think just kind of putting it back on them, it's like starting to like create some patterns for them. It's like, oh shoot, like that's my responsibility to do it as a team member, because I actually like worked on this user story. And yeah, so obviously like, showing and teaching, and I'm sure you guys look at your, cumulative flow charts or burn down, and just kind of like seeing, hey, like when you don't move it, or when you have this user story in doing for 5 days or in testing for 5 days, then like it probably wasn't there for 5 days, but then it's giving us that metric as when we're looking at it, because we just didn't do the small things that could have helped, obviously.
Yeah. And it goes back to thinking micro level with the team and high level, right? Because if you understand what your product manager or the director of your org, your program, if you understand what truly matters to them, you'll understand what to do. So for instance, if my product manager or my director really cares about story points, I need to really coach how we operate in that space. If my product manager or my directly really just cares about the business value and what we're actually delivering at the end of the sprint, that may look a little bit different. But the team need to understand that, because then I don't have to be so strict just about story points, but I need to be more strict about what are we actually pulling into the sprint. And it can look a little bit different. And sometimes we focus too much on both, where we're putting stress on the team to do a certain thing, when one is really more important than the other. And right. And so you have to be a little bit just, both are important, but you can't have, everything can't be the top priority, right? Something needs to
Right.
be take one spot, two spot. So you really just
Yeah.
have to help them with that. And then those small things will get better as people understand that.
Yeah. So are you almost, I mean, it sounds like you're aligning with the goal of your leadership team too. It's not just, you know, here's what I'm going to come in and do. You're like, okay, like what do they want to see as a leader? Why is that important for them? So you're aligning in that way too. Is this something that you're just doing, like aligning with like what's important for them? Are you just kind of taking that time to understand it yourself? Or do you feel like the product or the leadership team comes to you and say, hey, this is what's important?
No, that's something I have to do myself. I think, and that's not a bad thing for our leadership at any level, at any company.
Mhm.
I think sometimes we get comfortable with what we're doing and we're doing it for so long, we just don't naturally revisit why, or we don't
Mm,
naturally revisit that. So that's part of what I take ownership of when, my teams are doing certain things throughout the day. I take ownership of asking those questions. Hey, I
mm,
realized you asked a few questions on this call about this. Tell me more about that. Why did
mm.
where were you coming from? What was your mindset or your perspective when you asked the team that question? Or why were you wondering that when we gave that demo?
Yeah.
And as I do that, I start to understand more. Now I can help my team. And now our team can help you. Then we
Right.
can ultimately help our users and stakeholders be better. But I think
Yeah.
sometimes we don't go that extra level and ask those questions, whether it's from fear and we don't want to, or it's we don't see the value in it. But I think anything that you can ask is valuable. And I truly believe that the more questions you ask, the better questions you ask, the better you'll be if you
Yeah.
take those things
Totally.
and just truly use them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, this is where like that growth of a Scrum Master happens in a sense. I feel like it's where you are not just like aligning in a team level, but like you're there to serve the whole organization as a whole, right? And so that's why I asked that question, because I know you're doing that. And if anybody's not and just like sitting there, because you are a leader, Scrum Master is not just like a random role in an organization. I mean, yes, like you are leading teams, but then there's like a service from your side as a Scrum Master, and especially like a coach. Like you're obviously like, more of a leader and Agile coach. And so it's really important to have a service to the leadership team as well. And, some of the things that they were asking the team in a sense, like some of those questions that you mentioned, if they were asking just to ask, or like maybe they care, or like maybe, certain practice, maybe it's not suitable for the team, then you taking that time to ask some of those questions like, hey, why didn't you ask that? Why is that important for you? Obviously, one, it creates that communication transparency, but also then it maybe also will give you a moment to be a service, like a coach the leadership team on certain thing. There's no like right way, but then there are certain practices that can help them again go away from like that doing agile. Are we just asking, or are we just doing, or is it like, are we being that's truly important? So that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. It's been
Yeah.
helpful.
I want to move to AI stuff because that's everywhere. That's talk of the town, right? I'm sure, I know in product it's a huge influence, and it's changing so many things and the way we kind of do everything. I guess I'd be curious, like how have you guys utilized just AI, maybe just in product in general, are you guys incorporating certain into product building, or are you guys using it in a team level? Kind of how has it influenced, like maybe in a team level? Maybe we can kind of talk about that a little bit. And then maybe like as a Scrum Master, like in a different way, how has it influenced the way you work as a Scrum Master, right? Like I think there's twofold to this. In a team level, what the organization team is, how is it adopting? And then what are you doing as a Scrum Master, and how is it impacting you in your role?
Yeah. And man, I love talking about AI. It's crazy how fast it's evolving, but I know we're nowhere near where it's going to be, especially within like the next year. Like I can't imagine next year, this time where we're going to be
I
with it.
know.
One thing I've been observing from multiple Scrum Masters from different companies around the world is every company's kind of coming up with their own form of it, right? Because you want something internal that's not fully spread out. And so one thing, start using it with your team in small ways. Figure out a way to use it, whether it's you and you can suggest it to the team during a sprint planning or something like, hey, why don't we use AI for this, right? Like small ways I've started to use it is utilizing it in meetings to give
Mhm.
overviews or recaps at the end. take note of action items, right? Because a lot of times we forget what I said on the call, what I was going to do. And we expect one person, like the bookkeeper, whoever that is, to keep those things and then send them out. But that's a small way you can use AI if you're recording meetings or something like that, is the action items that are left at the end or talk throughout. Some different AI versions I've seen will actually help you create templates for user stories. So you can actually put it in, what you're trying to do, what you want to do, and it will create that template for you. And then you can put it in the Jira or Atlassian or whatever you use, right? Azure DevOps, and you can utilize it that way. So I've seen that be very useful. Those are just a few ways, but I think written communication is very important too. Because one thing I've seen is, and this goes back to earlier when we were helping people just communicate better, right? Because one thing I've noticed is a lot of times, most times, the 5 ceremonies that you usually have are not enough for your team to be effective. And not everybody's super busy, but sometimes something comes up and they're like, oh, well, I haven't gotten a chance to talk to this person. Okay, why not? Oh, well, we just haven't set up. Darian, can you set up the call for like me and this person, this person? Well, everybody needs to be in it. You set it up. You can do that. Right? So it's just, and it's helping, and AI can help with written communication, setting those things up as the why, as far as also helping you find the best time to do that, whether you want to do it weekly, bi-weekly, it's a one-off call or monthly. So we've utilized AI in that form as well. But it's not that I want to take myself out of things, but again, I want to give people empowerment and help them start their own things so that I can continue to help the team grow in other areas, not just setting up meetings, right? So those are just a few ways on a basic level it's being used. I can't imagine what it's going to do in the future outside of like just teaching other ways to code or just helping those processes improve, because we'll be delivering business value like crazy at that point, right?
Yeah. I mean, does your organization like allow folks to use ChatGPT or?
No, we're not using it, but we have our own internal form of it, which is similar. We're not using ChatGPT for work.
You got it. Yeah. I think, many organizations are still not quite there yet, but I'm guessing like other forms of even wireframing and like, I think there's like Otter AI, there's like these things that it can be integrated into your meeting, like the taking notes and things like that. Is your company at all from a product standpoint, are they incorporating AI into what they do at all or not yet?
Absolutely, in many ways. I can't speak to all of them because I'm not really in those orgs at all, so I don't want to speak to that. But I know it's very prevalent. I work in the energy industry, so anything you think of, your power, your electricity, I work in that industry. So AI is infused into everything. It's infused into how we, get data, different things like that. So yeah, it's very prevalent where I work. And I love learning from some of the intuitive teams who are on the ground doing those things and helping build our future to be more effective. So I look forward to working with one of those teams one day.
Yeah. I mean, I guess for yourself, like, how are you learning about AI and just like kind of growing yourself in a sense in just like in the role, or just like, I mean, I imagine obviously like not fully being able to use ChatGPT at work, but like, are you yourself, like, are you learning prompt engineering and just like doing certain things so that way you're, like, not like that it doesn't impact your job in any way, or like, how are you, I guess, if you are, like, how are you
Absolutely.
going with it?
I love it, especially like I said, with my written communication. You have to learn from that because you can use it for that to improve your own personal written communication, but you can also utilize it to make more effective meetings. So a lot of times I'm like, hey, I know we're pretty efficient. We've turned this hour. Now we're used about 35, 40 minutes of this call, right? So we made it more efficient. We're doing that. But how can it be more effective? What can we bring in from input and what output to another call from it, right? So I can use AI on my own and say, hey, like, these are they're topics that we cover in this call. These are the different types of calls we have. How can I create more input output so these things flow better?
Yeah.
Right?
No, that's amazing. Yeah.
So now I can start to think about that and be like, oh, okay, like we actually didn't talk about that at all here. Now we can utilize our roadmap in this call this way. Maybe we don't look at the picture, but we zoom in here and we talk about this and why this part is so important, right? Or maybe we haven't been bringing in a certain user or stakeholder to a certain call that we can start to implement them. And that'll make our process better. So I've just been using it to really helped me understand how things flow better together. And on a personal level, I use it a lot. Like I'm always utilizing like learning how like ChatGPT goes versus like Llama from the
Mm-hmm.
meta version or different ones and how they learn from each other. So I'm very
Mm-hmm.
intrigued on that in my personal life. So I use it a lot. So I'm always trying to figure out better ways to work myself in that. And
Yeah.
then utilizing that with our internal system and understanding, hey, because I can give feedback, right? This is new for a lot of people. So I think the more you learn outside of work, the more you can add value to work, whether that's your internal system or whatever that looks like. So I'm constantly learning from that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. Let's kind of move to maybe some suggestions or advice for like new Scrum Masters in a sense. Obviously, I think it's still like a big fear for folks that like don't maybe come necessarily from technical background, like, oh, I got to be technical. I guess what advice would you have for just agile leaders who are maybe, and it doesn't have to be for Scrum Masters, it can be for product owners, it can be for BAs, right? Who are stepping into this like a new environment and just like really need to quickly understand both like the technical and the human side of like working with a team. Maybe if you can even like go back into like, what did you do to like understand that there's this technical side? Maybe I don't need to learn everything, but like, here's what I do need to know. What were some of the things that you kind of did?
Yeah. And I think you said a very important word, understanding. Because I
Mhm.
truly believe people think communication and understanding are the same thing, and they're not. A lot of times there's a lot of communication on a call, but no understanding. And I think
Mhm.
that's very important. So the one thing I always do, whether I've been in an org for a year or two, or I'm just joining, is I start with one-on-ones because I want to start to understand perspective on why people are doing things and their perspective on their own skill set, what they're doing. That's how I learn to work quickest. So you can give me a 5-page document on what our work is all day, but until I talk to someone and I start to understand like the levels of it and the details of it, I'm really not going to understand that. And if I have
Right.
8 engineers on my team, each of them has a different level of understanding of what that is. So it helps paint a better picture for me and helping to understand that. And then talking to my PO. So I just really see a lot of people don't do that. And it's
Mm.
really, I think if you really want to understand your team, you really want to help, you should be having one-on-ones. And it doesn't have to be every week for the year, right? Like have some when you first join a team, have them quarterly with your team, right? Whatever that looks like, but start to talk to your teammates so you can build relationships with them, right? On one end, so that you can understand from a technical level because sometimes you're also like embarrassed to ask some questions. You don't know what every acronym means. We have a million acronyms, right? Like, hey, I
Yeah.
would say FAC on a call. Like, what is that? Right? What does that mean? Where did that come from? How does that impact our team? What do we do? So I've just learned to ask a lot more questions in those calls, take notes, and now I can utilize that in stand up. I can utilize that in sprint planning, and it makes our calls even more effective, right? Because we're starting to do those things. And now people can come to me and say, hey, Darian, because that's another thing. One-on-ones help so much with why relationship is so important because a lot of times people wait until meetings to ask questions. And I'm like, we
Mhm.
have like Microsoft Teams for a reason, right? Like this goes between communication and understanding. Like, don't wait until stand up the next day if you had something. If it's Monday at 3 o'clock and you have a question, like ask it, right?
Yeah.
And I think the more you build a relationship with people, the more someone will be willing to do that instead of waiting the next day. And then now we can move better, right?
Mm.
So I just really have helped learn a lot from that, whether it's from a technical aspect or whatever, and just remind them to talk to me like, explain it to me like a fifth grader.
Yeah, I used to do
Right?
that in my
Please do
developers.
that, right? Because I'm not going to understand everything, especially as if you're within a certain industry, like I'm in an energy industry, but our teams work on a broad range of things in that industry. So if I'm joining a new team, yes, I know we're in the energy industry, but you may work on marketing or you may work on, the light poles that are outside of our house or whatever that looks like the grid. And so I really need to understand what we're doing and some of the technical aspect behind that. So again, I can have that communication with our leaders as well as helping our team be empowered because it's like, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? And how do we do it?
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, totally. Do you find yourself just on like, I mean, different meetings, right? Like I'm just thinking for a brand new Scrum Master and they like go and start to like facilitate some of these Scrum ceremonies. And obviously the development team is just gonna be like, like they're gonna vomit all this like technical jargon, right? I mean, I guess what did you used to do when that did happen for you in the beginning? And like what helped? I mean, obviously, like in my experience, it helps over time as you're just with the team. And, I had to understand that like they didn't hire me for my technical expertise. And there's just so much that I just needed to learn. And I had to kind of remind myself why I was in this role. But anything else that you kind of feel like that could be helpful for a new person?
Yeah, and I smile and laugh at that because it's like experience is the best teacher, and you don't have to start perfect. I definitely wasn't perfect. One call in particular, I remember with the teams I started with in backlog refinement, it gets so technical, and I'd be the one sharing my screen all the time, or I would be fixing a statement or acceptance criteria in something, and someone would be saying something, I'd be typing out, I know it would be wrong, like, no, we didn't say that word, we said it. It's like, oh, and it's like, this is taking so long. So I was like, listen, I don't have to share my screen to facilitate. They don't go one on one. I can facilitate a good call and have someone else share their screen, and this call go way smoother. But I stopped sharing my screen for some calls like that, and I started encouraging either our tech lead or if we have it, like, and that's the thing too, sometimes we focus on specific things in backlog refinement. It's not always the same format. So if we're focusing on a specific piece of our work, have that person share their screen and type things out, right? Because it'll just go a lot smoother. And then I can keep us on track. I can facilitate well. But I think that was something I learned way too late. And I went through that struggle of typing things out, backspacing, typing things out. And the calls just took forever. And I was like, this is not right, right? But I didn't learn beforehand, right? It took me going through that experience on my own to learn that. And then the team was like, well, I don't want to share you. You're the person that shares your screen, and you'll go through that. But I go back to my saying no. I say it in a different way, and we have fun with it. So
Right.
if nobody shares their screen, we're just going to be talking. So somebody will end up sharing their screen.
Yeah, I want to next talk about how do you think the Scrum Master role kind of has evolved, right? Like, obviously, I haven't like been on like a Scrum Master role in some time. Obviously, I'm kind of keeping up and like talking to people like you, but there used to be so much misunderstanding of the role, and most Scrum Masters just really didn't know, and they just like facilitated one or two meetings and just kind of like called it a day. And I feel like over the years, it has kind of backfired in terms of leaders like, okay, what value are you really adding? And just like the organization, maybe not seeing as that value because it's like they're just playing that facilitator. Like, okay, I did a daily stand up, I'm done. Okay, like in 2 days, backlog refinement is going to come. There's 2 meetings, 3 meetings, and okay, that's really it. I guess let's kind of just talk about how have you seen the role evolve first, and then I have a couple of follow-up things we can kind of talk about after that.
Yeah, you have to set the right standards for yourself, or somebody's going to set them for you, right? So I try to be proactive as I can. So what that looks like for me is when I'm not with the team or thinking at the team level, I'm trying to think at the helicopter view level. So how can I start to think at our portfolio level, whether I'm asked to or not? That's not the purpose. How do I start to think at the portfolio level so I can go ahead of our team 6 months or even to a year and start to think that way, so that I'm setting the team up for success? Because that doesn't just look like what the business value is we're delivering this sprint or what we're delivering this month. Sometimes it's the practices or the way that we're working, or it's talking about how we want to get something done later. I may be talking with an engineering manager about how, we have 5 engineers on the team. We may need 7 to 8 to really get done what we're hoping. Or I know we want to do this one thing. So how do you start to just think at that level and think proactively to really build? That can be hard sometimes. And it's hard to even like say that when you're not specific in a situation. You really have to think proactively and get out at the team level sometimes.
Yeah, and then I think it's important to remember for Scrum Masters, or just like when you're going into an organization, I think the misunderstanding that maybe some of them have is like them just thinking they're a change agent in a team level. But in my truest opinion, I think when you're a Scrum Master, you are taking a leadership role. And so you're a change agent across the organization, right? And so I think to your point, like you starting to, okay, like I'm not doing some things for the team level today. So how do I work in that program or the portfolio level, or like, bigger objective, like what is the organization trying to do, and how can I like be a change agent and help them facilitate that process, or like understand higher level process, so then like if there are inefficiencies, then how can I contribute
Yep.
in a
And
sense? And it sounds like you're doing that.
absolutely. And you have to realize too, like what you're doing with your team could have a much larger impact outside of just your portfolio, your department. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you're doing things within your team, and there are 4 or 5 other departments that have Agilists or Scrum Masters in them that could really be using those practices. And now you're
Yeah.
thinking company level, but still team level, but now you're thinking company
Mm-hmm.
level, right? And you're like, oh, like we really have this process. I really figured out a way to really hone in on our 2 weeks and really
Mm-hmm.
get the most out of our team. How can I help other Agilists or Scrum Masters do that with their teams?
Yeah. Yeah, that's
And it's
amazing.
one way
Amazing.
to just be at your level, but be very valuable across the board. And I think
Yeah.
that's really helpful. And I don't think we do that enough. Whether you have community of practices at your company or
Mm-hmm.
not, that's something, you can get people together. You can
Yeah,
have,
you can do it, right? Yourself.
right?
Yeah.
Not to say you have to run it every time, right? Be a facilitator of the facilitators,
Yeah, totally.
but you can also do that and you can start to share ideas and learn and grow. And I think that I've always thought like that. So it's been natural for me to create environments like that. But I think that's another way that we can just continuously grow and get
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Cool. I guess maybe next part of it, I want to talk about it because I do think for just the Scrum Master Agile coach's journey, right? Like it's not just going to be what has been done for
Mhm.
like the last decade or so. I do think their role it's going to evolve more to getting involved in like product strategy, like a lot more innovation, working in a leadership level. I guess in your experience or like just kind of what do you think? Like, how do you see this kind of evolving to where you are contributing more to product strategy and innovation?
Yeah, it's a very interesting and great question. When I started in the agile space as a scrum master, it looked a lot different than it looks now. I think the roles are a little bit more fluid than they used to be. They used to kind of have a
Mm,
start and an end, and now those
yeah.
lines are a little bit blurred based on how you set your standards or what your team may need or what your company may need. Sorry, ask the question one more time.
No, like how do you just kind of see it evolving to more like you contributing to product strategy and not just being in a facilitator, being in that team level, which you kind of sounds like you're doing that where you're stepping into like the portfolio level, you're working with the leadership team. And like maybe even you can even talk about like what kind of led you to kind of do that because that's I think it was where like all Scrum Masters should head to because you don't know what the future holds with especially with AI and just kind of how things are kind of rapidly changing because you want to become that in that like you want to add a value in a certain way like okay you've built this skill set that was so not just like as a facilitator and as a coach in a team level but like you expanded to other areas so that now you can contribute to this and that I guess anything like what do you see how do you see this role kind of evolving and like around that.
Hmm. Yeah, so I think about roles and responsibilities. I think about like RACI charts, things like that, like traditional things.
Mm, yeah.
And I know that a lot of times, like I said, you're thinking at the team level as a scrum master, but you want to start to think about, we have safe as a structure. You have less like
Mm,
scrum at scale as a structure. And
mm,
sometimes those structures can blend to make the best of both worlds, just different structures. So you want to start to see what can you do in your org to do that? How,
mm,
what are you missing? And if you start with
yeah.
what you're missing, you can start to look at that, okay? And it's like, okay, I understand we have these calls, but we don't really have any calls connecting our leadership and our team.
Yeah, like moving inefficiencies in a sense you're saying.
Inefficiency. Why,
Yeah.
like, where is our flow? If we have a flow up, but we don't have any flow down, then
Mm,
where's that communication? Where's that understanding? So we're starting to understand things at the methodology level. And it's
mm,
and hey, okay, I've realized in SAFe we do these things. This is really helpful how we just get together as a team quarterly and we plan this thing out, right?
yeah.
At the Scrum at scale level, we do a few other things, but how do I take pieces of that and add that to what we're doing now? It may not be,
Mm,
it's not saying that we're safe. We may not be able to do that.
yeah.
How do I take aspects of that and like I can start to apply that if our org has 6 teams within it and our communication between those 6 teams isn't great, what can I start to implement at that portfolio level so that we can start to apply those things better? What teams
Yeah.
need to get together to really start to collaborate better so that our users and stakeholders can have a bigger impact on the work that we're doing, right? So
Yeah.
it's really just thinking like that in the strategy of
Mm,
how Now you're thinking bigger, you're thinking at least 6 months out of how your portfolio is delivering work, right?
Yeah.
But you really have to get in tune with, like I said, being proactive and understanding the work. So you at first have to understand what you're doing, understand the body of work that's happening. You have to understand your team and their influence on that work. And then you can start to help them. Hey, maybe we need to add this type of call. I need our leader, I need our PMs, and I need like the tech leads in this call. That's it. And this is
Mm,
what I need you guys to talk about because this is a missing piece,
right.
right?
Oh, that's
And
beautiful.
so
Yeah.
it creates something that is it could, like I said, I'll keep saying that, a missing piece, because I think that's why we're here, is to find the gaps, right?
Yeah.
And to help people
Mm-hmm.
understand, like, how do we get better? Because a lot of times you just don't know what you don't know. And sometimes I just need to
Mm-hmm.
sit back and observe and not say anything for a few weeks and just like, oh, okay, I see it now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that's really, really important, right? Like, I feel like that's how you go away from just being that facilitator. Like I ran a daily scrum now. I don't gotta do anything rest of the day. I think rest of the work requires you to analyze some of those things, have those conversations, identify some of those gaps, what's in place, what's working, what's not working, what can we remove to be more effective. And if there are certain things that are working and they're adding ton of value, let's keep doing it. But if not, let's like remove it. And then I think, in a grander scheme, like I think Scrum Masters and Agile leaders, they really do need to start thinking about product strategy in a sense, also like where you're working with the product managers. And it's like, okay, well, when we're adding this feature or we're trying to bring this work in, where is it coming from? Like, what's their process like? And how can you also help them be more effective and efficient in that process too, and not just like as a Scrum Master in a sense too.
Yeah. And when you say all that, I think about that visual that a lot of people have seen where it goes from the scooter to the bicycle to the motorcycle to the car,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, if the people don't want a plane, why are you trying to create the pieces to give them a plane, right? Maybe they just
Hmm.
want a much better engine on the car.
Yeah.
And so that all goes together with that. And just
Yeah.
understanding at a product level the vision, and then making sure that the team really understands that vision.
Mm.
I see that a lot of times where like the product owner is really involved, but they may not see the team may not see the product manager or talk to them often. So how do I get
Yeah.
them in front of them more?
Yeah.
Right? How do I get y'all in front of them so you can ask them questions sometimes? And it's not to go over anybody's head or anything, but it's to create more communication and more collaboration so that they start to understand why you're doing what you're doing and helping out.
Yeah. Totally. Totally. I know earlier you mentioned that you've been able to kind of just create certain wins at your job. I would love to kind of hear how have you been able to like create certain wins by like maybe not doing a whole lot, but like being more efficient and effective. You want to share anything on that?
Yeah, there's so many different ways you can create small wins. I remember one of my teams started as Scrum. And
Mm-hmm.
with the type of work, and this is me observing for a few sprints, but with the type of work that we had and what we were doing, it really didn't make sense for us to run as a Scrum team. It made sense for us to be a Kanban team. And I remember us just having that conversation, and it was a transition that made a lot of sense. It hurt a little bit, but it made so much sense, and then the team started to just work better, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a small win or a big one, however you want to look like it, where you are, but it's something that really impacts an org or impacts people where you may just have to make that shift, right? I remember helping a few engineers really just take ownership on what they were doing, as far as whether that's user stories or jumping into this or jumping into that, helping POs understand how they need to communicate the vision to the team. Because a lot of time you're just the visionary, but you don't communicate it. You're just getting calls and kind of talk about what we're doing and why we're doing it. Not always why, but just what we're doing.
Yeah.
So I've just seen small wins. I always try to think of things in a basketball level, but like if our goal is the championship,
Mm-hmm.
we have to practice. We have 30 some games in a season at in the college level, and then our goal is a championship. So all those small things I'm doing are leading to that, which you may
Yeah.
not see right now, but you will, right? So yeah, the small wins, I've learned to just help those things. I think this is another one. A lot of folks don't get a lot of exposure, right? So
Mm.
if you want people to get more exposure, help your engineers start to speak more, either whether that's at a demo or whatever that may be in front of other users or stakeholders or in front of other people at all hands. Try to find your team opportunities to be seen, right? That goes a really long way, and I don't think that happens enough. That's another small one. I'm trying to think of a few more. Yeah, that would say that for now.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. That's really cool. Well, last question for you. Obviously, you've been in this career path for like the last 5 years or so. How has just kind of being in this career path changed or impacted your life from where you were maybe 5 years ago?
Oh man, I can't even express in words. I've learned so much from the community of people I've been around in this space. I think it was really hard for me to even transition from coaching just at a personal level to help people understand that. But I knew where I was going with my family and I knew what we wanted. And I still have a lot of those relationships with, coaches and players and things like that as well. So I don't miss it because I'm still there, right? But it's helped me just understand things in a different manner. Like we run our household with our little kids in an agile manner, right? We do so many things and we utilize our skills in so many ways. And I'm just truly thankful for the opportunities that, I got from the Agile Academy and going through you guys as kind of that boot camp or that coaching cohort in the beginning, so shout out to y'all for helping facilitate just that growth in people and helping people get to where they want to be. But also just learning not to be so strict in my ways. I think it's helped me so much. I wanted to be the Agile police when I first started and just come in like, oh, we have to do it this way. No, we have to do it that way. And I've just learned you can't do that. It's not going to help your team. You can do it, but it's not going to help your team. No matter where you are, how rigid things need to be agile yourself, right? And start to help the team implement 1 or 2 small things at a time and really build those relationships to do that. And learning that in itself has helped me so much in life and given me so much to look forward to. So if I can learn it, I can teach it. If I can teach it, then I can teach other people how to teach it. And I think it's like teaching people how to fish rather than feeding people. Right. So it's a continuous cycle of that and helping people do that. And I think as you do that, you will help different organizations grow at the level in which they need to. And as you move from team to team or org to org, you will bring that success with you and you'll create things even faster because of what you've learned in the past.
Yeah, truly, truly. Well, this has been a really fun conversation, Darian. All right, that's a wrap with this episode. Thank you for listening till the end. We hope these podcasts are providing value on your Agile journey. If you haven't visited our website, theagilecoach.com, we highly suggest you for other courses and supporting material on your journey. You can also get access to our self-paced courses or learn more about the live training that we provide to become a Scrum Master, product owner, product manager. With that, we will see you on the next episode. Love and best wishes from the Agile Coach.